Alright class, so here's part 2 of the video, and here is the document with the typos removed. And let's see if I can hide this thing. I never know how to do that. Oh, there we go. And nice clean copy, and I uploaded this clean copy. Still showing a few squiggly underlines there. Oh, here we go. One of the things that I wanted to show you in continuing this is if you look at this website over here, which is Wikipedia, my favorite. By the way, I would not use Wikipedia as your source for the debate, because in Wikipedia what you have is secondary sources. There are sources for the articles in Wikipedia, but you can go directly to those sources and use them. But I would not use the Wikipedia articles themselves, because if you say according to Wikipedia, that has zero credibility. However, the sources that populate what's in Wikipedia themselves have credibility. But the reason I'm showing you this is just a list. It's not evidence for a debate. But the list here is of debate resolutions. Let me get rid of this ad here. A list of debate resolutions that have been used in high school, going all the way back from the current year, which is 2014 to 15, all the way back to 1926. So you can get an idea kinds of policy things that high school debaters and also college debaters debate. They have very similar topics. Usually the high school topic kind of follows a year or two behind the college topic, so whatever you see on the college list, you'll probably show up on the high school list. And you'll see that all of these have the characteristics that I talked about, in that they are real, tangible, urgent, can be evidenced, and they're expressed as propositions of policy, so that the affirmative is forced to defend or support the policy or resolution, and the negative is required to respond by talking about whether the harm really exists and whether or not the relationship between the data that the affirmative is offering and the problem is a real connection, whether the affirmative has a good policy to respond to that, and finally whether or not there is any downside or disadvantage to doing that. In other words, whether or not the policy will work. And you can see, I'll zoom this a little bit, you can see that these are all exactly of that type. Usually they're very specific. I'll just pull out one by random. The United States government should substantially increase its transportation infrastructure in the United States. So that's 2012 and 2013. So you can imagine that the affirmative could write a brief basically saying that we need a much more modern, complex, up-to-date, and comprehensive train system in the United States. If you've ever traveled in Europe, you know you can get anywhere in Europe via train, and the trains are great, and there's all different types. And in the United States, if you want to travel by train, that's a pretty difficult thing to accomplish. Yes, some parts of the country, fine, but others almost impossible. Like try to go from Cincinnati to anywhere else in the country by a train. It's almost virtually impossible. So the affirmative could offer the reasons why that would be addressing a problem. The problems could be in the areas of energy, the environment, the economy, how we're lagging behind, etc., etc. And then, of course, if we are just committed to fossil fuels and cars and the ways that we have transportation now, that's not going to go away, and we're going to have more congestion and more smog and more difficulty with our transportation system and less energy independence, etc., etc. And then the proposed solution, of course, would be exactly what you'd want the government to do to create the initial investment, I guess, of infrastructure in the rail lines and the trains and the destinations, and then finally provide some evidence that would work. And I already gave some evidence when I was talking about how Europe already has such a system. It's very effective, widely utilized, and good. I mean, a lot of people in Europe don't even own cars because it's so easy to get around on train systems. If you're an urban dweller in many cities, you don't need a car. Now that's true in the United States too, but there are lots of urban areas that are not accessible to other intramurals because we don't have a true transcontinental commuter rail system. And of course, there's freight also is another part of it as well. Okay, so that's just an example. And of course, the negative could go in numerous directions. Basically, they could say we're not Europe. We could say that energy independence is possible without doing that. They could argue that trains are expensive and have to be subsidized by government, that they lose money, that train fares are too expensive, it's actually still cheaper to drive, that railways are prone to terrorist attack, that railway derailments and collisions happen, so forth and so on. Again, you can take it as any way you want, and since you're picking the topic, you can decide how narrow, how broad, just as long as you make it a proposition of policy and have the affirmative defend the change and the negative argue against the change. In other words, standing for the resolution or proposition, that's what we call it, or against the proposition or resolution. Okay, so I hope that helps and makes that a little bit clearer. Okay, one other thing I wanted to mention about the assignment is you probably noticed from the syllabus that on the syllabus this is listed as 2 separate assignments, and I'm assigning it as 1 assignment, so it's a double length assignment. So you actually get 2 grades for this assignment. You get a grade for the affirmative and a grade for the negative, but there's a nice little bonus that comes from this assignment, because a couple of you have asked me about extra credit or attempts to improve your grade after the first exam. And the bonus is that whichever of the 2 grades is highest counts twice. So let's say for the affirmative brief you get an A minus, and for the negative brief you get a B plus. I will erase the B plus and give you 2 A minuses, but you have to do a complete and thorough job for both in order to get the credit for both. So don't just write a really great affirmative and then nothing for the negative and hope that you'll get as good a grade for the negative. Each one has to be 2 pages long and do as good a job as arguing that side of the issue as the other one does. As a matter of fact, the assignment is really to see how well the 2 sides square off against each other as you brief the arguments. You're basically another way of thinking of this assignment is you're basically writing what's called a pro-con analysis. You're analyzing all the arguments on either side of an issue, and you're doing it in a structured form. So you could almost think of it as a structured outline in which you're writing it in a full text format in which you're just making claims and supporting them with evidence. Making claims, supporting with evidence, okay? So whatever topic I pick, whatever one I go with, I can set it up that way. If I can go back to the topics here just to give you an example of how to approach this, I'll just randomly pull out another one. The federal government should establish an education policy to significantly increase academic achievement in secondary schools in the United States, which is the 1999-2000 policy. Okay, so notice, by the way, secondary is high school. So in this resolution, the debate powers that be decided that every team in the United States would only debate high school, because I guess high school is a crucial time. If you don't graduate high school, lowers your level of employment, employability. If obviously you're not going on to college unless you finish high school, unless you get a GED later. So there's lots of positives that are associated with finishing high school. Plus, high school achievement is, one could argue, is very poor. Okay, so let's say I decided to pick that one, and I decided to argue that the problem that I've identified with high school education in the United States is that high school achievement is going down. So if you look at us compared to countries in Europe and Asia, we used to be in the top 5, and now we're in the top 25, and we're slipping, and soon we're going to be in the top 50. Okay, so we are less competitive than other countries at producing educated high school students. Okay, additionally, we are having people fail in high school at an abominably high rate. So you have high school dropouts, people who are leaving school. Oftentimes their leaving school means that they're going to be jobless or unemployed, and oftentimes their unemployment leads them into a life of crime or poverty. And so these are all negative effects. So having made those assertions about how bad our educational system is, I can simply go and find that evidence because there's a million articles and studies that have been done that show the trends in secondary education in the United States, and you can always demonstrate pretty easily that things are terrible. And you can also show that these things are not going away. Okay, the schools are getting worse, the trend is continuing, the funding for education is in decline. State, local, and federal governments have deficits. They can't make up the deficits. They cut educational programs all the time in order to do that. The cost of education and having educational systems is going up. The infrastructure costs. These are the inherent reasons why this problem is not going away. Okay, so what could you propose to solve that? Well, one thing you might do is you could have a complete comprehensive set of national standards for secondary education that every school, public or private in the United States, must meet in order to get whatever benefits the federal government provides to education. And by the way, the federal government provides a lot of funding to educational systems or educational programs, primary, secondary, and post-secondary. Post-secondary being higher education. Once having proposed that, that's a pretty comprehensive, gigantic solution. You're going to provide what evidence there is that such a solution would work. Okay? So again, it's a very straightforward thing. I find the problem, I identify, I pull the evidence, I cite the evidence, I say what I'm going to do about it, I say why what I'm going to do about it is going to work. And in every case that I make an assertion, I provide the evidence. Now, when you're presenting the plan, you don't have to provide evidence because that's just your idea of what will work. But when showing that the plan will work, you will provide evidence, obviously. Okay. For you negative teams, your approach is to just tear that apart. Okay. And since you're writing your own negative against your own affirmative, you know exactly what the arguments are you can make, so you'll know exactly what you can find against it. It's a very healthy exercise, again, in seeing that every controversy has two sides and that there is no, quote, truth in a debate. There is advocacy. There is making a case or defending a claim. When you have adversaries going at each other and they both have evidence, studies, reasoning to support their claims, they can easily find good support on both sides of the issue to back it up. Okay? One other thing I'll say in closing, again, you don't have the experience of watching a debate, participating in a debate, but you have watched a debate. Also, I encourage you, if you have time, go on YouTube and just do a search for like a sample high school policy debate. You'll see the format that's exactly correlated or that corresponds to this sort of resolution and what students do with that. And you also hear an affirmative case, so you'll know what the brief sounds like in terms of how evidence is cited. Strongly encourage you to do that. But I do think this is a good exercise because you'll basically, again, be going through 80% of what happens in preparing to debate. The only thing you won't be doing is standing up and reading the case and having your opponent read the response. One thing in closing that I'll say is it's very important that the two sides in the debate clash. So whatever the affirmative says, the negative should be a direct response to that. It shouldn't be an independent set of claims on the same topic that go in a different direction but that miss the mark. So, for example, when I was just talking about education, the negative could come back and say, our education system isn't nearly as bad as people claim. And they could actually provide evidence of that. So just be aware that that's something you'll want to keep in mind, is that the two sides, the two briefs that you're writing, the affirmative and the negative, should be in direct opposition to each other, and they should directly respond to each other. The affirmative has the burden of proof, the negative does not, but the negative's response to the affirmative is over the claims that the affirmative is making. So good luck with that. If you're running into any issues, post a question on the discussion board and I will answer it so the entire class can hear. And have fun with this. And also have a Happy New Year.